Hey, Access family, we're here with lead pastor Brian Cisneros to do a year in review of 2024. Pastor Brian, I know that it's been such a busy year, but we wanted to see just your overall look of what 2024 has been for you.
I think 2024 was a year where we really saw God's hand of favor and grace upon our life. I think it was a year where we kind of, as a church, began to come into our own as a church, as a ministry. And I feel like this was a year where we began to see so many things that we knew were coming begin to be realized in our communities.
So, looking back at 2024, were there key moments for you that impacted your life?
Definitely. I think for me is always worship under the stars every year. It just keeps getting bigger and better. And yes, we keep getting bigger crowds. But one of the things that impacted me when we were preparing for the baptisms for Worship Under the Stars, I think we ended up baptizing 54 people that night. But we were having a baptism class just here locally at our Eagle Pass campus. And when I began to ask those baptism candidates how they came to Access Church and how they gave their life to the Lord, I would say probably 90% of them said it started at Worship Under the Stars. And for me, that really just ignited a passion for this event and to really understand how important that event is to the community. On its surface, it's not necessarily an outreach event. It's an event where we gather to celebrate what Christ has done for us. And on Easter weekend, as you know, it was a pivot that we had to do in this community, and that was just something that we saw God do something amazing. But when I began to hear candidate after candidate say, well, I started going to Access after Worship Under the Stars, it really highlighted the importance of that event. And then I think also for me is the women's conference is always a key moment every year, because that is a year where we really get to highlight the creativity and innovation that of the talent that the talented people that God has brought to Access Church. And I think you don't find churches in this region putting on a conference of that caliber. And so for me, that's another thing. I think our kids camp every year, I think we had over 500 people show up for our kids camp and our kids festivals, and kids ministry is always great. So yeah, I think for me, those were probably the top three events of this year that were critical turning points that led to a lot of the impetus of the growth that we had. And then, I would not hate to not mention what God is doing with our young adults group, not just here at our Eagle Pass campus, but also in our Del Rio campus. Years ago, I don't know if you remember, Dr. Luke Holter gave us a word that it was going to grow like a wildfire. And I really feel like this is that wildfire that he was speaking to and prophesying about, because it just keeps, growing and growing. And even here at our Eagle Pass campus, we can have 30 to 40 young adults just on Bible study. They make up more than half of the group that comes out every Thursday. So for me, those were very, key moments and highlights of 2024.
Was there like a defining moment for you that you knew, like, okay, this is it. This is what's taking Access Church to that next level?
There's so many things that we could talk about, and of course, for me, it's always about the people. And one of the pastors that had an influence on me many years ago, he said, every number has a name and every name has a story. And I never get tired of hearing the stories of how people either heard about Access Church, how Access Church, has touched their lives, their families. And I think for me, one of the things is the ripple effect. With one person coming, then pretty soon they bring their mother, their daughter, they bring their husband and their family members. And for me, when I see that, it is overwhelming, because it all comes down to loving people to Christ.
Definitely. I think that you show it in yourself, how you live out the core values of loving people to Christ, of serve as we lead and lead as we serve. And it's so fitting that that's kind of been our end of the year series of doing all access. So going back to 2024, was there a moment where you realized, you know what, God, you're doing something bigger than I could have ever imagined?
I think I felt that from the very beginning. When God gave me the mission and I think the mandate for Access Church, it was really hard to conceptualize what that would eventually look like. And it always looked bigger than myself. It's always looked bigger than what I was able to do. But I think as far as this year, for me, I saw this year as expansion, as extension, where I really felt that the reach of our church began to extend further than just the four walls, running into people across the community that I have never met, maybe have never stepped foot in Access Church, them telling me how Access Church has touched their lives, how they've heard it from friends and families that Access Church is a great church. And I think I remember one morning I was at a certain establishment having my coffee, and a gentleman that had visited our church for the first time, and we were preaching the series on love. And I talked about what our mission is about, loving people, and how I want Access Church to be known as a church that loves people, no matter what condition, no matter what situation you find yourself in. And he had family members that attended the church, and they had been inviting him, and he finally came. And for me, it was just heartwarming to hear him say, you know what, everywhere I go in the community, that's what people say about Access Church. Access Church is a church that loves people. And for me, that was a truly defining moment.
That's awesome. And I know you went into a little bit of expansion. So I think we've all seen the growth and expansion that happened over this year, that it kind of just exploded. And even with Eagle Pass now having the 2 services, what were some of the challenges that you see that we faced as a church, or are you personally with that growth, in line with that growth?
Kind of going back to the last question, I realized that this was bigger than me. I needed people to come alongside me with the same heart of loving people to Christ, with the same heart of everything we do, we're doing it in excellence. And so this year we have extended. This year was the year where we added the Brackettville campus, and they came alongside with us. And then, as you just mentioned, a few weeks ago, we launched our second service here in Eagle Pass with being a Spanish speaking service. So I think for me, one of the things was I realized that I really needed to focus on certain things and really, do what God has called me to do, and really kind of push down some of that decision making. And for me, I know that we've known each other a long time, and we've had the opportunity to work in ministry, for many, many years. And some have said that I'm a control freak. I deny it, but I think that was a little bit uncomfortable for me, outside of my comfort zone, to really trust the people. And I can say that God has, and I often say that to our leaders, that God has really blessed us with the best. And I really feel like we would not be able to accomplish all that we have accomplished if it wasn't for the amazing people that God has brought to work alongside me in this endeavor.
I definitely agree. I think I've been able to kind of see just behind the scenes of how you've been able to navigate situations and decisions and just making them back to back. And sometimes it's like you don't even have a chance to really expand on it and process it. You just have to go, go, go. And speaking into your leadership style, I think you've always mentioned you can always do good by investing in yourself as a leader. What would you give to people that maybe want to grow in their leadership? What are some practical ways that they can grow in that area in their lives?
I think first and foremost, you need to find a mentor. It's important to have a voice, someone that has experience beyond your experience, has information beyond your information, and can actually see your life and know your life. And to have that voice, one of the books that I read that really impacted and drilled that home to me was John Maxwell's 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And he made a case how so many Super Bowl winning coaches were connected. It's almost like there was a period of about 20 to 30 years where every coach that won a Super Bowl worked for a coach that won a Super Bowl, and really drilled down that idea of the importance of having a mentor. And so for me, anybody starting off in leadership, I think you need to find that voice. You need to find that coach, that mentor, someone that can speak to you in love, but speak the things that maybe you don't want to hear. And, of course, I have my pastor and I have a couple of other mentors and friends that are that voice to me. And I think for me, if there's one thing that has really fashioned and formed my leadership is having that mentor voice. And then I think also having self-awareness. And I think that's where a lot of leaders really, really struggle. They're afraid to be vulnerable and transparent. And so they try to hide their deficiencies. They try to hide their weaknesses rather than exposing them and confronting them and being able to see, this is where I'm not good at. So I need to staff to my weaknesses, bring people that might be strong in an area where I am weak. And I think that's where a lot of leaders really struggle with the admission that they may not be strong in some areas, and the importance of finding people and trusting people that might do a better job than they could even do themselves.
Wow, that's really great insight. I guess looking back, you as a leader, I think you always kind of see everything that's going on, but was there a moment or maybe like a series for you that actually ministered to you or helped you develop in any way?
I think for me, the one series that really, I think spoke to me on a personal level was Real Faith, and looking at the gospel from James, the half brother of Jesus, and really understanding the dynamic of that relationship, how challenging, but how comforting it is for James to have grown up with Jesus, seeing him from the time he was young, and now evolving into his earthly ministry and mission, and the practical insights that he was trying to teach the church on how to be Christians. And he was speaking to the Jews who didn't know how to be Christians. They had no concept of what it was to be a Christ follower, and how he just really brought that those concepts and those principles to a practical level where people could live them out in their daily lives. And I think for me, the one that really spoke to me the most and probably ministered to me the most was Real Faith.
Real Faith. That was a great series. And speaking of Real Faith, was there a moment for you where you had a moment of, okay, God, like I need faith right now in order for this to happen? Was there a moment for you in this past year?
Several moments, but I think for me as a church and a ministry, we have been very blessed financially. We are a generous church, and generosity fosters generosity. And I had never been in a moment where I was worried about finances. But our year this year was so challenging from the get-go. We had 4 or 5 very heavy events at the beginning of the year, starting in January, through the couples, through our kids festival, through Worship Under the Stars. And that really hit our finances. And so I was put in a place where I had never been in the inception of this ministry, really having to believe for God for the finances to keep the mission going, for us to keep going. And I think for me, that was defining, where I really had to say, okay, God, I need to know that you're with me. I need to know that you're here. And so that was something that I had not yet experienced being here at Access Church, because we had always been, very, very, blessed financially as a church. And so when we needed to purchase things and we needed to make investments, it was, I didn't have to do much stress or prayer about it. But for me, this year was one of those years where we really had to trust and believe God. And here we are, we're at the end of the year and we've made it, and God is faithful.
That's awesome. Now, exactly how you said, now that you're here at the end of the year and you saw God's faithfulness, is there anything that you would go back to within this past year and say, like, I would have done that differently, or if I would have trusted God a little bit more? Or do you feel that you and Access Church accomplished everything that it needed to accomplish for 2024?
I think as a leader, let me rephrase this. As a good leader, I don't think you're ever satisfied. I think you can always look back and say, man, we could have done it just a little bit better. Maybe we could have stretched ourselves a little bit more. And I'm probably my toughest critic. I go back and watch my weekly preachings, and I'm inside cringing. Like, I could have phrased it better. I could have maybe not stuttered as much. I could have focused more on this, or I should have prepared more. So I think just in general, my passion and my pursuit of giving God excellence and giving God the best in everything, I don't think we're ever satisfied. But would I go back and change anything? Probably not. not, because I realized that God even takes our mistakes, God even takes our failures, and he takes those and he works them together for our good. So we may not be who we are today if we didn't have those failures, if we didn't have those missteps. Maybe we would have missed out on a leadership lesson. Maybe we would have missed out on a faith lesson. And so, at the end of the day, I see we've had attacks, we've had opposition, but that God is faithful in those things that the enemy meant for evil. God always turns them around for our good. Could we have done things better? Yes. But would I go back and change anything? No, because we are a product of where we have come from and what we have done.
Well, Pastor, thank you for your time. I know it's been a crazy year again, just having that behind the scenes experience, seeing how Access Church hit so many milestones, like you said, Bracketville, the second service, and honestly, just how we had to pivot, right? Because it was going to be an English service, but how we changed it to a Spanish service. And now we're seeing that grow too. It's just been an amazing testament of, one, your leadership, your faithfulness to God. I think all of us can attest to being able to really see the vision that God gave you lived out and played out. And it's been such an honor and a blessing to serve you. But we're going to change things up a bit. Okay. I know like last year we did this rapid fire round. Okay. So I'm going to need you to be on your toes and just answer questions quickly. So I'm going to ask you a question. It's just going to be really quick and then you're going to have to answer. Okay. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's go.
All right. And this is for 2024, like your favorite things of 2024. Okay. All right. Your favorite song.
Holy Forever.
Your favorite event.
Worship Under the Stars.
Your favorite guest speaker.
Cruz Ramirez.
Your favorite series. That was a series. Your favorite word for 2024, or it could be a slang word or a fancy word.
It would probably be juxtaposition.
All right. And now your favorite moment of 2024.
I think my favorite moment of 2024 is just, for me, it's every Sunday. Every Sunday, standing at the door, seeing people walk out blessed, touched, some cry, some laughing, and just, commenting how big of a blessing that Access Church has been to them and to their families. And I think that just pushes me to keep going forward every week.
Now, as we head into 2025, is there something that you would like to share with everybody in the mindset or a model that you have for 2025?
Great question. In fact, just a couple of weeks ago, the Holy Spirit dropped the word transcendent into my heart, into my spirit. And it is a word that I probably have heard and probably used, but never really looked at its meaning. And so after that, it just kept resonating in my heart and my spirit. And God the Holy Spirit would just tell me that this is going to be the year that Access Church is going to transcend, the year of transcendence. So I went back to look it up, and it says to rise above or go beyond the limits of. And I think that's exactly what we are going to see in 2025, that Access Church is going to rise above every limit, of every obstacle, of every force of opposition, that we are going to rise above. I think that Access Church is going to be a year where we do less, but impact more. And that's my focus going into 2025, to really focus on the areas of greatest impact, because we don't have a lot of time. We've got to get the message of Jesus Christ out there, the message of love, of faith, of hope. And that's been my focus for 2025.
Awesome. Well, there you have it, Access family. That is your 2024 year in review, and we cannot wait to see what God does in 2025.